Customer Success RP360. And I've been really fortunate over the past, call it year and a half, ever since the pandemic really started. I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, probably too much time, but it's really led me to meet a lot of incredible people such as Maria, have good conversations about the vertical, and also has provided me with opportunities to be a coach at Catalyst Software. They have a great mentorship program where CS professionals or people that are aspiring to get in there looking for mentors, they match them up. So that's been a really big pleasure to be a part of that program. I was also part of the beta group for the Gain, Grow, Retain community. If you're not aware of that, would definitely recommend you check that out. That's a community that not even a year old, and there's a ton of people on there that are always talking about topics that all of you all and myself scratch our heads about every day. So it's a really fascinating community with a lot of great content in there. And then just my background in general. So I've been at RP360 for 2 years in March. But in general, prior to that, just a lot of client and project management. So a mixture of services and software, research, data. I mean, kind of the whole gamut. I've been really fortunate to have some pretty interesting projects. And I consider this venture at RP360 my first true foray into customer success. And it's been awesome. I've really learned so much. I continue to learn each and every day. So a little bit about RP360. It's an RFX automation tool. So if you've ever responded to an RFI, RFX, a tender, or you've issued one, this is a tool that's intended to help you automate that process. So that is just a real high level of the tool and what it does for our customers. Based in Kansas City, Missouri, so right smack dab in the central part of the United States. Founded in 2012. So we've grown quite a bit over the past couple of years, thanks to a few rounds of funding. That's really been helpful to us to grow our team. Current customer and employee base. So we have about 45 employees, including 8 in customer success, including myself. And, getting close to that 500 customer mark. So that'll be a big milestone for us. And obviously very relevant to this conversation because we have to figure out how to engage and scale and meet the needs of all those customers. So if you're curious, I also included this map up on the screen. If you're ever interested in walking from Montreal to Kansas City, it would only take you 429 hours. So just want to give everyone a visual because I know not a lot of people know where Kansas City is, but just a little visual to acclimate me to where I'm at today. Okay, so let's get into the content, the meat of the discussion. So I thought it would be important to share with you all our current structure and tech landscape. So this is really giving you an idea and lens into how we service our customers today. So the team is split up into what I call 3 practice areas. So this is really looking at the customer journey from start to finish and how we're going to support them from each element of the journey. So it starts with onboarding. So our onboarding team consists of 3 customer success consultants that are really responsible for training, configuration, really trying to achieve that time to value. As we all know, that's a big buzzword out there, but we really want to get customers up and running as quickly as possible, but also making them feel comfortable with the solution as well. So it's a delicate balance, and there's a lot of white glove involved because we're on the phone, we're doing training. We don't have the luxury today of, hey, just go to this learning lab and watch these videos and you can get in here and configure it on your own. So it is a lot of high touch, white glove service across the onboarding team. That process typically takes anywhere from 45 to 60 plus days, depending on the solution. And from there, the customers transition to an engagement team member. So today, everyone gets a named CSM. That's going to change. And as we will see in this presentation today, that will have to change as we scale. We just can't add humans and in order to meet everyone's needs. So the engagement team is really responsible for, okay, now that you've onboarded, let's make sure you're getting the most out of the platform. Let us be your advocate to RP360, our product roadmap. If there's a need and a desire to do a QBR, let's figure out how we do that. We're also, we'd love to do more success plans. So all of those things that we all know today that we hear about, we're trying to figure out how does this apply to our world today. A lot of you on the phone, we all have different ACVs. I know Maria is very, very high touch versus Dart. It's very tech touch. So we're trying to figure out all of those elements of customer success that we read about and hear about. How does that apply to our P360? So we're actually going through an exercise today to re-identify our team and how we support our customers, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But the engagement team on paper is really trying to drive value, make sure that the customer renews, make sure that we avoid the churn, et cetera. And then support, break fix support, and really helping all end users, not just our administrators, but all end users. If they have a question or if there's a technical issue, then we are here to help support them with those issues. So that's a little bit about the team. Now, in terms of the technology, there's a lot of technology on here. I tried to include some of the more popular pieces of technology we use. So we use Churn Zero for our CSP. So Churn Zero plays in the same world as Gainsight, Tango, all these names I'm sure you all are very familiar with. Salesforce, we're a big Salesforce shop. I was very fortunate that the small team prior to me joining did a great job of setting up Salesforce in a manner that gives us really good data. So we use Salesforce today for the buying process. We use it to house contracts, renewal opportunities. We even have a custom object to track implementation. We also use the service desk element as well as the community element. So there's a lot of elements of Salesforce we use today that help us with the care of our customers. And then some of the other tools that come up fairly often are Gainsight PX. That's a new tool for us using it. It plays in the same space as Pendo, WalkMe, those digital adoption tools. So we wanted to understand how customers are navigating the site, where we could intercept them and present training or self-serve options. I won't go through all of these, but some of these other tools you may or may not be familiar with, but they play a part in our day-to-day operations. So that is the kind of the current structure and tech landscape of our team today. So now, as we kind of move forward, what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about, our model today and what we're doing today as it relates to Tech Touch, as well as what we want to do. There's a lot of things we want to do. I think what we're challenged with today is what's the first domino to fall, and how do we go from step 1 to 3 to 4 to 5, so on and so forth, because there's a lot of things at stake, and I'll kind of walk you through that today. So obviously you have the customer, and the customer today is engaged from a technical standpoint a number of different ways. So within the application, all of us who have an application, there's probably some alerts or notifications, some automation that comes out of your tool that is alerting your customer on, hey, you need to take an action, or you need to do something, or you need to complete something. So there's that element that exists today, very hands off. It's just system generated alerts. So that's a Tech Touch element. I mentioned some of these tools on the earlier slide, but I also wanted to give context as to why we have those tools today. I think that's important to talk about the purchasing decision and why we ended up investing where we did. So we needed a system to really measure customer health, understand how we can leverage a tool to help our customers and scale our efforts. So, this tool, as you may guess, is Churn Zero. So Churn Zero, we're using heavily for plays and journeys. So that really means, how can we automate and give our engagement team all the tools we need in order to send out periodic reminders, send out, maybe it's office hours, maybe it's a renewal reminder. I mean, there's a lot of things we can do. We're barely scratching the surface. In fact, I see our old CSM on this call, Chase, and he knows that we have a lot of work to do in order to get the most out of the platform. But that's what it's there for. That's what it's intended for. The next tool, hey, we need a system that captures all aspects of the customer journey, from buying through renewals and everything in between. Surprise, surprise, Salesforce, that is probably one of the more popular ones. It doesn't need to be the end all be all though. I mean, there's plenty of much lighter weight CRMs out there, but I do think it's important that you have some system of record that you can start to develop your account or customer profile. And whether that lives in a CSP or a CRM, I mean, there's a lot of different schools of thoughts. Some of the newer CS platforms, they're trying to do a combination of Salesforce and CS. So there's a lot out there. I would just encourage you to have something, even if it's a spreadsheet. I've talked to a lot of people that say, I don't have anything, so I'm putting it on a spreadsheet. Great, that's perfect. For us today, above all the reasons we mentioned, the Tech Touch element from Salesforce is service desk. So that's a lot of automated back and forth. very basic, very straightforward functionality. And then we also use the Salesforce inbox. So that is really their module that captures all the email correspondence back and forth from customers. So then what I can do as a director is I can start to aggregate all of those touch points and see where the CS team is spending their time today. And so we can start to drill down into the segments, and we can start to understand, gosh, this customer who falls in this segment is contacting us quite a bit. Well, why are they contacting us? Oh, well, they have a need for a piece of content or a piece of collateral that we don't have today. So maybe we should sit down and create that so we can work to provide different avenues for them to achieve what they need to achieve. So that's kind of the gist of Inbox. It also allows us to, similar to Calendly, you can share times to schedule meetups. So, and then last but not least, system needed to measure product adoption, engage with customers. This is our newest product, so we just invested in this last fall. But Gainsight PX is really a tool that was heavily endorsed by our product engineering team. Our CTO had used it prior. And again, it plays in the space of Pendo, of WalkMe, of all of those digital adoption tools. Really, from a CS perspective, what we're hoping to get out of it is we want to leverage their two things right out of the gate. So their knowledge bot. So think of it as the little circle icon lives in your application. You click on it, you know, you see them all over. They're very prevalent in any type of digital, you know, e-commerce, SaaS application. Normally there's a chatbot component. There could be a chatbot component. We use it today to expose our knowledge center. So it has an integration with Salesforce to where we can surface help articles. You can search right in line and then click on it. It takes you to our help space. The other thing that takes time that we're working on now is kind of the walkthrough, the engagements, the areas of the site we know customers have friction, so we can help them understand how to overcome that friction within the app. So a couple of good examples that we're using this for today, we put a lot of emphasis on trials. So we want to give potential buyers a test drive to our product. So we put a lot of engagements in a trial environment to help them navigate through the site, to help them understand what it is that they are going to do or what we expect them to do. And then we're going to recreate that experience in our production environment for current customers. And, you know, again, the expectation that we're trying to set is it's not going to solve every problem. Not every customer is going to click on the engagement. We know that. We know who clicks on it and who actually finishes it. Everyone has a different style of learning, whether it's self-help, whether it's talking to an individual, but I think it's providing multiple channels for them to achieve that outcome, whether it is through Gainsight PX or a CSM. So I will pause there. It looks like, Dart, you have your hand raised. Is there a couple of questions?
Yes, we have a couple of questions. So first of all, why not use churn zero to capture the emails? That's a question.
The question is using churn zero to capture emails, or?
I guess who's
like and yeah,
you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
I asked that because you said that you're capturing email via Salesforce and not through churn zero. So I wonder why you do that through Salesforce versus churn zero. Is it because you only offer to attach to your customers, and so most of the emails are to the support? Just trying to get a sense of.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you're right. Churn zero does allow you to capture the emails and manage a lot of your inbox out of there. To be honest, I mean, this is a bad answer, but I think we, you know, the big driver was the ability to book time on the calendar, and we use Calendly. Some people do, but we wanted to level up a little bit. And again, the integration, and I think our Salesforce rep cut us a deal too. So the investment was pretty minimal. That was a big driver, but certainly you could go either way.
And I have another question about this chart. You're using Gainsight PX to harvest the usage data and analyze it. Is that because churn zero doesn't have that capability, or there were some capabilities with Gainsight PX that you prefer to have yet another tool for that?
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of overlap. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap, and it was a debate that because you're right, you know, churn zero captured the same click level data that Gainsight PX does. I think the biggest differentiator was the knowledge bot that integrated with our Salesforce help space. I mean, that really was the differentiators. There was an integration there, but Churn Zero does everything that PX does for the most part, in terms of walkthrough. You can do walkthroughs, you can do, you know, the engagement, all of those things do exist in Churn Zero. So again, I mean, there's a lot of overlap in these tools, that's for sure. And so I think as a buyer, when you're evaluating this, you need to think about what it is you want to do. And the other thing too is the Gainsight PX decision was heavily influenced by our CTO. So the product engineering team had a lot of weight there as well.
All right, Brian, another question. So it must be a big challenge to manage all these tools at the same time. So how do you leverage all of them? Do you have like a user journey map, or what's your strategy regarding this challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge that we certainly haven't perfected how we manage it. I mean, we're a small company, right? So with 8 people on the CS team, I'm actually creating journeys and engagements in Gainsight PX. So I think we all try to understand what tools are available to each practice area and then try to figure out how we can leverage them to the fullest extent. But we're not perfect. And that's the thing that I challenge my team on is, hey, there's a lot of tools out there, but rather than kicking the tires to see what other cool, new, shiny tools are out there, let's make sure we're getting the full breadth of capability out of the tools we invest in today. Because, you know, Churn Zero, PX Sales, they're all great tools and they've all served us well, but we're not perfect by any means. So I don't know if I have a great answer to that. I think in a perfect world, you know, if you're fortunate to have a CS ops person or your team's a little bit bigger, maybe you could assign more responsibility to those individuals. But today we all take a little bit of responsibility for each of the tools.
All right.
Any other questions before I move to the next one? Looks like Maria, within the playbooks option, can you deliver EBRs at scale? Meaning you have thought to how to deliver in this. And I think you probably could. We don't. Yeah. I think there's a lot
not
of
yet. Yeah.
Yeah, not yet. I think you probably could. I think for us, it's who should get an EBR, and that's where we're at in the journey. Who should get an EBR? What are we going to talk about? Because, you know, given our ACV and the role we play in the entire ecosystem of huge companies, we have to really challenge ourselves to figure out, well, what can we get
in the content
that really drives, you know, people to be like, wow, this was incredible. This is so cool. So I think that's where we're at in the journey.
Yeah.
And then, so if we have Gainsight PX, why not the whole package? We evaluated Gainsight when we purchased Churn Zero prior to my arrival, and we made the decision to go with Churn Zero. We had it on PX, like I said, a couple months ago. And is it what I would recommend if I could start all over again? Probably not, because like was mentioned previous, there's a lot of overlap here, and that creates confusion on what does what and who should do who. So keep you all posted on that journey. This is just what we have here today.
So we have a question from Adrian.
Yep. Yes, you're right. The theme is that important is to have continuous iteration and improvement. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's exactly what we're going through right now, which is why I told Maria and Dart yesterday, this is so timely because we are at a critical juncture where we're trying to figure out how we can support all these customers, irrespective of their ACV or what segment they fall in or who they are. And that's a real challenge. And so we always are trying to iterate. And so that's why we're spending more time with our Churn Zero CSM to figure out how can we automate. In fact, I'll advance to the next little visual on here. How can we automate, for example, renewals? We have almost 300 renewals this year. And so if I'm going to go to my engagement team and say, all right, you all need to manage that. I mean, think about how much time you're spending emailing. All right, your renewal's coming and here, okay. And then, you know, so we have to be better at that. And so how we can be better at that? Well, we can leverage Churn Zero and the integration it has with Salesforce to tell us, A, who has an auto renewal provision, and B, if they don't, when can we start alerting them by leveraging Churn Zero to have that dialogue? Hey, your renewal's coming up in 60 days. Just wanted to let you know, here's the price you could expect to pay. And you can incorporate a lot of variable fields based on the data you have to automate the experience to a degree. Now for us, where it stops is, you know, we have DocuSign to facilitate renewals, so we don't have that baked in. You know, there's still some manual intervention that has to occur, but this is just one of many steps that we can take, or that we are taking today, to try to help us get to kind of that next level of maturity. The other example too of tech touch, very basic, right? For me, when I use Churn Zero, I use it a couple different ways. One is anytime an implementation is created and they're in the onboarding phase, then an email goes out and I welcome the point of contact to the company and to the tool. And, you know, Churn Zero, like a lot of these platforms, they do a great job of, you know, it feels personal. It feels like it's coming from your inbox. It's not like this automated marketing-esque email. So they do a really good job there. And then the other one I just rolled out, I'm really curious to see how it goes, is like a lot of you, or maybe not, maybe it's just us, but we have customers where it's like day 60 and it's like, all right, what's going on with these? You know, like we're not doing anything. We haven't even talked to Bob in 3 months, like, or, you know, a couple months. I'm not sure what's going on. So there's an email that goes out. Anybody that's been in onboarding for greater than 60 days, I send an email very tactfully stating, hey, normally at this point in the journey, you're able to do X, Y, and Z. Please let me know if that's in alignment with where you're at, or if there's anything else we can do to help support you. Kind of poking a little bit, trying to push them, because I mean, with everyone under 12-month subscriptions, if they're in onboarding for the first half of the subscription agreement, then that puts us at higher risk for those people to never fully adopt, and then they ultimately churn out, which is what we're trying to avoid. So, so anyway, let me go ahead, and looks like we're good on the questions there. So I'll go ahead and advance to the next slide. So this is very, you know, I'll caveat this by saying, you know, where we're at in this journey, and this journey is like, this is real time. This is, and if there's anybody from my team on here, they might not have even seen some of this as well. So it's real time. These are things that we're considering. I'm not suggesting we'll do all of them, but I think we're starting to come to a point where we feel like this is the direction we need to go, given the resources, given the senior leadership strategy and what they're hoping to accomplish. So the first thing is we need to identify new segments. When I started, we did do a segmentation exercise, but it was very vanilla. It was, okay, who pays us over this dollar amount? You're in this segment. Who pays us under this dollar amount? You're in this segment. And that's what we've used. And they've gone very stale, as you would imagine. There's no creativity within those segments. It's very stale. So the first thing we need to do is identify new segments. So like a lot of you out there, we're going to go towards the direction of, all right, who are our true strategic customers that should fall into a strategic segment? And they may not be the ones that pay us a ton of money. They may be ones that we feel like have an opportunity to expand organically. So we want to put them in there because we want to give them a little more attention. And then on the other half, what's important to this conversation is a tech touch segment. So at this point, you know, getting away from naming a CSM for every customer, we're going to have to start putting customers in the tech touch segment only if we have the tools and processes behind it to back up that experience. Because if we just roll this out tomorrow, a tech touch customer would be like, I didn't hear from anybody for months, right? Because we don't have those triggers in place to let them know what's available, let them know how they can learn and adopt the tool. So new segments, obviously first. The other thing that we're working on, and a member of my team is working on, is we're going to experiment with engagement levels, I guess is the best way to put it. So gold, silver, bronze. And the idea is each of these engagement levels has a series of tactics. Some are human touch and some are tech touch. So the idea would be you would fall into one of the segments, maybe you fall into the tech touch, but maybe you have a gold engagement level. So that gold engagement level is telling the engagement team that, okay, if they fall into this flow, we've identified this is where they should go, then it's going to be a combination of tech touch, but I'm also going to get on the phone and do, you know, QBR with them once a quarter, because we know that there's a lot of potential here. On the flip side, there could be a customer that pays us a lot of money, and we're going to put them in the bronze engagement level because, quite frankly, any attempt to talk to them is met with a lot of radio silence, which is frustrating. Like, that's frustrating to all of us, but they've renewed 4 or 5 years in a row. And so you kind of start to think, all right, well, maybe they just want the tool to work. They just want it to be frictionless. We can continue to deliver on that. Do we really need to try to bug them with strategic exercises when they're just not interested? And I know that sounds counterintuitive to what customer success is doing, but I'm also trying to figure out where to place the chips for my team to get the most and to give the most. So that's kind of the concept of the engagement level. So each engagement level would have a mixture of human and tech touch. Then you kind of round it out. So I'll kind of advance all of these. So just to acclimate, there's a lot on here, obviously, so I'll try to do my best to explain it. But thinking about some of the tools, the more popular tools that we use, Salesforce, PX, Churn Zero, what I try to do in the first column there is identifying automation tactics to align with each engagement level. So for example, for Salesforce, we already use it for customer support today. There's a lot of automation activity there. But if we chose to invest even more in our customer portal and community, obviously that's a topic, that's one that people pursue. And so can we create an environment, or should we create an environment where customers can go to collaborate, they can vote feature ideas up or down, they can talk to one another about best practices. So there's a lot that goes into a community, as some of you may know. So it's not something we would just roll out and say, all right, it's here, because you need someone that can maintain it, support it, keep it active, keep it current. So there's content there that needs to happen. Gainsight PX, I talked a little bit about it. There's a lot of opportunity there, from publishing release notes, publishing sliders to talk about release notes, guiding people through that new release feature that just came out, focusing on trials. We have this concept of people who participated in an RFP that was issued to them. They aren't paying customers, but they still use our platform, much like if you've ever used Ariba or Coupa to answer an RFP or a security questionnaire, kind of the same concept. So what can we do there to create a frictionless experience, because those folks don't have a named CSM, they're not a paying customer, but they still use the tool. So, what can we do there to kind of identify areas of opportunity to nail that? And then Churn Zero, like I said, I'll be the first to admit we're not using it to its fullest extent. So let's start with the renewals. Let's figure out what playbooks we can use for the onboarding team so that we can automate some of those pieces, or at least have a mechanism to track where each person is in the journey, because it is highly manual today, the onboarding. And we don't have the luxury of me going to my CEO, who I report to say, hey, we need more resources on onboarding. Because the first thing he will say to me is, well, what tool, are we maximizing the use of our tools and being efficient with our time? And so until I can prove otherwise, we'll have to do that. So the key is getting people up and running as quickly as possible. And then on the far side is, what are the goals? And I kind of spoke to some of these, but the goals, we have to have goals so that we can say, if we choose some of these, or like I said, we aspire to do some of these, not all of them will happen, but if we aspire to do some of these, then what are the goals? And so we can take a look back and say, hey, we really went all in on Gainsight PX to do all these engagements. So what is our goal? Well, we want to provide multiple avenues for self-help opportunities, or we want to provide metrics for the CSM engagement team to understand how people are navigating so they can make intelligent recommendations. Or maybe it's for the sales team. Hey, now they can look at all their trials in progress to be able to articulate what's going on and how they can position themselves to close a deal. So these are there's a lot of words on here, so I won't go through all of them, but the key is obviously we want to have goals to align to these tactics. But most importantly, and I put it down at the bottom, change management for both internal team and customers on new engagement behaviors is going to be huge. There's a lot here. A lot of this is, some of this may not happen, some of it may, but if we don't nail the change management piece, then it will be a failure, in my opinion, because, for example, if we go to the tech touch segment and essentially tell them, hey, you're not going to have a named CSM at your disposal anymore, that's people are going to be a little frustrated, confused, irritated. So we have to be really diligent in how we unfold the change management, both, like I said, both internally and externally. So that sort of plays into one of the next slides. So I mentioned that we are trying to re-identify our team, because what we've found as we've grown, that what we say we do on paper isn't actually a reflection of what we are doing in reality. So I've asked my team to go through and really identify what it is that they do today. What are the areas they feel like are higher value add versus lower value add? And then what do you want to do moving forward based on what you know about your role? So I will pause there. It looks like, Dart, we have a question from the group. Which, are we talking about the NPS question, or which one did you want to tackle? Okay. So Pat asks, we know NPS is highly used to evaluate customer experience. You also measure the customer effort score. So how does the CES impact renewal for you? Great question. We admittedly, we have done, so we did surveys I love surveys. I really do. I worked at a market research company a while ago. So that's all we did was measure the customer experience. So we have done, so each year we do a deeper survey with just our key stakeholders. So it's asking a series of 10 to 15 questions, and it takes them a little bit longer time. It's not an NPS or an CES score. So it takes a little bit longer, but we get a little bit of richer data out of it because we can kind of understand the key stakeholders who are typically the buyers. What do they want? What are they seeing? So we have that. Then we also did an NPS survey last year that we facilitated through Churn Zero. And admittedly, I'm not perfect. So I was like, we just need to do this. So I just fired it off, right? If I did it all over again, I'd probably be a little more strategic about it, but we fired it off to any and all users that had accessed the platform, I think in the last 30 days. And the results came back and they were not really anything to brag home about. So it was actually a really good exercise because then it put the onus on us to figure out who are those people that fall in kind of the detraction segment. And then we actually put together an effort to reach out to all those customers individually that rated us poorly to understand, well, what is it that we can better improve upon? And what came out of that was an initiative through our roadmap to really focus on some of those elements. So it was kind of cool to see it end to end. Hey, customers are really concerned and frustrated about this. We're going to try to address this on our roadmap shortly thereafter, and then we can kind of come full circle and tell them, hey, we listened to you and we did it. So I think that, Pat, what you mentioned is great. That's where we need to be. That's where we need to go. It's just trying to prioritize that among many things. And then acting on it too. I mean, that's a big thing. Like there's so many ways to collect data, so many different survey methodologies, but to be honest, I get a little nervous because I feel like if we can't act on it, then we're just doing it to check a box. That's not fair to the customer too. Cool. Are there any more questions, Dart, that I'm just going to scroll through? I want to make sure that.
Yeah, I think, Brian, I just had a thought. It was more of a comment based on the Salesforce Community portal that you might be working on. I think it's going to be really great once you maybe grab some key topics and then maybe organize a webinar and share some content more valuable and then scale with a lot of customers at once instead of having one-on-ones. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're leveraging here for our long tail. We have a very rich community, and that's how we're impacting the long tail customers. So you'll be able to do that, right? Because it's one of your goals there.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I would encourage the group to do, if you aren't already, is oftentimes I will look at the vendors we use and kind of what segment or what engagement model we fall in to see what they're doing. And so we use Gong, we use Churn Zero, all those tools. And so I'm like, Gong, if you've ever used it, it's a great tool. They really have had a lot of success. Their brand is very powerful. They have a lot of big fans. It's a sales enablement tool. So I'm like, all right, let's see how the CS team interacts with us. I know we're not their highest paying customers, so we get to see kind of the emails we get. And a lot of it's more customer marketing, product marketing focused. It's not really, I can reach out to our CSM, but I rarely hear from him from a proactive standpoint. And that's by design too. So Dart, what's the next question we have here?
It's a question for me. So you have a lot of touch points, and you were speaking about automating the renewals. Mm-hmm. But is there any other touch points that are automated, even if they're tech touch, obviously, but are they automated? And how do you target people, and how do you manage? Because you don't want to overflow people. You want to have the right message at the right time, and that's the big challenge. We use Intercom here at Merino, and that's always the challenge. So how do you manage with all your tools to get the right message at the right time automatically?
Yeah, great question. And I'll give you a couple of examples where I feel like we do an okay job at that. So again, leveraging Churn Zero. So Churn Zero or any CSP will more than likely be able to allow you to do click tracking data within your platform. So you're going to know who's clicking where, what they're doing, how often they're doing it. So what our CS engagement team will do is they'll look at, all right, what are the areas of the site that people really, we want them to use the most extensively, or that we feel like they're going to get the most value out of. And then what we'll do is we'll set up automation to say, all right, if my group of customers doesn't access the content library to update records in 60 days, then send out an email from me that says, hey, I noticed you haven't updated your content library. Let's set up a call. Here's a link to my Calendly. So they're being really strategic about those certain areas to trigger emails that encourage the customer to reach out, because maybe there's a training issue. Maybe there's an issue around, oh, I tried this one time and it didn't work, so I gave up. So that's probably the best example I have, Dart, in terms of leveraging the technology to figure out what customers are doing and then insert themselves appropriately. But you're right, you don't want to overwhelm them, because we also have our marketing team that does I think it's a quarterly newsletter. And that's all they do today. It's, it's perfect. It does its thing, but we also do G2 campaigns, give us a review, et cetera. So now all of a sudden you're getting touch points from different areas of the business. And that, again, is another challenge that you have to figure out how often your customers being engaged and what manner. Because, you could say, oh, everyone's getting the right touch points at the right time, I'm feeling good. But then if the data shows that you have a high subscribe rate or those customers are churning out, then it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. There's another question.
Yeah. So the next question, it looks like, is around how closely are you working with marketing when it comes to outreach to customers concerning time? So yeah, great question. I mean, we had plans to really engage with marketing pretty extensively last year, and unfortunately had some turnover in the marketing team, and so that initiative got put to the side a little bit. Today, our engagement with marketing is around a newsletter. So the newsletter will go out to all of our customers around, hey, what happened to the product? Here's some, it's very basic. And then the other marketing component we will work together on is, again, crowdsourcing reviews, whether it's G2 or Capterra. That's a really big lead driver for us. So we make sure we're getting reviews. But that's it. That's the extent of it. I think in a perfect world, and I know a lot of you have great experience, but in a perfect world, if I'm designing the CS team, I'd push for a CS marketing resource or someone that can do that. Or see if marketing can carve out at least a half of the resource, if not more, to help work closely with the customer success team to make sure communication is going out at the right time, the right place, et cetera. So the areas we do work with marketing are limited, but I mean, hopefully over time we will work with them more often. Is that all of them, Dart? I think, let's see here, just want to make sure.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So back to the future team structure. And again, this is a work in progress. We'll kind of see how this unfolds, but the idea is, we really recognize an opportunity that we need to pour more energy into support and education. We're spending too much time with the customer to say, hey, can you just hop on the call and watch me do this, right? I mean, they just want us to watch them do it so they don't screw it up. Is that really what you want your CSM on the engagement team to do? Probably not. I mean, it's a good thing, right? It makes them feel good, but we can't scale that behavior. So the idea here is, let's figure out how we can build out our support and education team that includes adding a new resource. So we'll do that. But then we will also give them ownership of Gainsight PX. We'll also give them ownership and more direction around Salesforce and how we can leverage that. And then what I'd like to do too is figure out a way to where they can facilitate some of those more lightweight trainings, or just more, hey, I just want to feel good that I'm doing this correctly. So there will be some trial and error as we iterate and figure out who's going to do what. But the idea here is to shift some of that responsibility off of onboarding and engagement to support and education, because today it's very reactionary. We're a very reactionary team, and therefore we're not able to add value. And so I tell my CEO today, I say, hey, I think we're largely a support and education function. So on paper, we thought we were going to do X and Y, but this is what we're actually doing. It's not a bad thing, but it's like we need to kind of shuffle the deck a little bit. And it includes adding another resource, it includes figuring out how to get the most out of our tools, and then putting our heads down and actually doing it too, right? We have to do it. So that is kind of where we're at in terms of structure and responsibilities, all a work in progress. We'll see how this unfolds, but I wanted to share this because I thought it was important, because you have the people element, which I think is the most important part, is making sure the people on your team are set up for success. They have clear delineation of their responsibility of what we're asking them to do. And I think we've strayed away from that a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to check the question wire here. It looks like I think we're all caught up. Cool. So I know we have about 15 minutes left, and
there's Brian, there's one question there from Rick.
Yeah. Which one is it? Sorry.
How would you approach a large community of customers that have a lack of, they have a lack of training? I guess how would you push training in a community? That's a great question.
Yeah.
And Brian, sorry to interrupt. Maybe I can give you more context if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a CSM, I'm responsible for onboarding, engagement, support, and education, and I have people that report to me on all these three sectors or sections here. So we have 8,000 brokers across Canada. Okay, and those brokers actually have regional sales managers. Okay, and we have a software that we develop and is supposed to be used by all 8,000 brokers. So what I'm noticing is a lot of them are actually lacking the education, the knowledge of using this. So what they do is they fall back to an older system that we use, and we synchronize the data, which is, you've probably heard about, you're laughing. It's probably a very common story maybe, but I can't reach 8,000 brokers, and even regional managers are limited because their job is to sell, right? So this is where my question is coming from.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's obviously a huge scaling effort. One of the things that we are doing, and we may have already done, I'll have to check with our engagement team, but one of the ideas is, and I've seen this with other companies too, that I think they've had success, would be setting up this concept of office hours. So you basically say, hey, from at this day, at this time, I'm going to have an office hours facilitated, Zoom call or webinar, whatever the facilitation tactic is. And then people can join as they wish to ask specific questions or talk about areas where they're stuck and areas where they need help at. And then you can kind of run through those questions, answer those, because the chances are that one of those brokers is going to have the same set of questions as someone else, especially given the sheer size of the brokers that are expected to use the platform. So there's that element that I've seen with some success in terms of the scale component. The other area is, again, thinking about how you can't talk to all 8,000 of those brokers. You can't obviously do that, but what are some of the tools you have today? So do you have access or the ability to create a community where people can go and learn on their own, or try to figure it out through talking to others? So you have that component as well. The other thing we've done with really large customers is kind of a train the trainer approach. So the idea would be, and it sounds like your model is a little bit different, but if in true B2B, where there's we're B2B to sort of C is what we call it. So you have companies that purchase a product, but maybe their 4,000 sales reps are using the RP tool to answer questions. So what we would do is more of a train the trainer approach. We would try to align with their training and learning department to make sure we're following the same rubric that they would follow, and see if we can get some success out of that. But I don't know. I hope that answered your question, or maybe plants a few ideas in there. It's definitely one that at that scale I don't have a lot of experience with, but we'll see. We'll kind of see how things unfold.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I think some other attendees mentioned about bringing it to a Slack channel, and so you got to use social media, right? Because you can't reach 8,000 people. So you got to have webinars, you got to have the Slack channel, you got to have YouTube, you got to have Facebook. You have to have it all, right?
Omni-channel.
Yeah, omni-channel, exactly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Inconsistent message as well. If you do the whole
and the consistent message, exactly.
Yeah, consistent message.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's something I'll have to discuss with our digital marketing team. Also, would be a good approach.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Any other? I think we are hopefully coming on to questions here. So I know we have about 10 minutes left, and Maria, I'm happy to advance to the final slide, even though it's a little bit different than what we just talked about. Okay, cool. So one of the things that I thought was an awesome idea from Maria and Dart was, hey, let's share a cool customer story. So one of the things that we just started doing, I'll go ahead and advance the slide, is we oftentimes our senior leadership team, they don't really know what's going on. They want to know, like, what are the good customer stories? What's going on? And so as customer success individuals, we eat, sleep, and breathe it every day. So we know, but we often forget to tell, or you only maybe hear about the bad stuff, how someone's complaining about this bug or this ticket. So we're trying to figure out what's the best way for everyone to understand what's going on with the customer and how they're using our product. So what we rolled out is we're actually featuring customers at our company-wide meetings. So we just had our first one a couple of weeks ago where we featured one of our customers who's just great, and she agreed to do it. I moderated it. It was a very basic kind of fireside chat, if you will, where we grouped prior. I went over a series of 5 or 6 questions that I was going to tee up to her. And then the idea was much like we're doing here, where we would hope that our team would use the chat to ask more questions. I was a little nervous. I wasn't sure how much engagement we would get, but not even 5 minutes in, we started getting questions from, our product team, from our engineering team, from our sales team, from our marketing team. And it was really cool to hear her answer those questions. And it wasn't about necessarily our product. It wasn't intended to be a rah-rah session by any means. We asked questions. Hey, when you sat down to evaluate your proposal automation stack and tools, what stood out to you in that process? Or what are some of the trends you see in proposal management moving forward? You have 20 years of experience. Where do you see this going next year? So we try to really incorporate the whole circle of questions, not just, hey, what do you really love about us? Oh, great. That's so good. Like, we wanted it to be a real, authentic, genuine conversation. And it was a huge hit. So we've already started reaching out to other customers. We're going to try to get them to, maybe it's every other month, we'll feature them. And it was a huge hit. So that's what I wanted to share from a customer, kind of a customer story that was fresh in my mind, that had a lot of success. So there looks like the question did come through from Samuel. So he says, at what stage should a business consider a dedicated onboarding team? And then how do you best manage the transition of an account from AE to onboarding engagement CSM? Yeah, great question. I inherited a team that wasn't quite split out into those defined areas, but we pretty quickly kind of defined those up front to where we knew we had a need. If we were onboarding 60 customers at once, we needed, a few resources to do that. And we felt like we couldn't go ask our engagement team to not only manage and be proactive, but to also onboard, because we felt like that would take, they wouldn't be able to put their best foot forward in the areas we wanted them to. So for me, Samuel, I don't know if I can answer at what stage. I think for us, I think you kind of think about and try to measure, quantify how much time is being spent today on onboarding, and then trying to make a case for getting a resource to do that full time or dedicated. I could speak better probably to the transition. So from a transition standpoint, we actually have pretty clear processes of what we expect of the sales team. So there's a checklist of things that they need to do. And once they close the deal, they need to go in, they need to create the implementation object, they need to add notes, they need to add business goals, they need to do a few other tactical things. Then we'll have an internal kickoff call. Maybe it's 15 minutes. Hey, how did the sales process unfold? Who's who should we watch out for? Are there any things we need to know? So at that point, our onboarding team has a pretty good understanding of what transpired. Having Gong in the background helps too, because we have all the call recordings. We actually go listen to the calls. Then we have a kickoff meeting with the customer, and then the salesperson actually kicks that off, restates the contract, what was purchased, what the goals are, and then they hand it off to the onboarding team, and they talk about the timeline, the project plan, et cetera. And then we're using that same implementation object on the latter half of that as well. So they're updating, and with Salesforce Inbox, we're capturing all the emails and correspondence. So they're updating how the onboarding process went, how it flowed. So then the engagement team will have all that context as well. They'll know what went on. So it's a lot of note taking. It's a lot of discipline around recording those interactions and making sure that we're setting people up for success. And for the most part, it works pretty well. We've had to, much like earlier, we've had to iterate. We've had to make a few updates. There are many times we have to go to the sales team and remind them again that they hey, you missed a few fields again. I don't know, I think the sales team, they've been a great partner. I think that's important too, right? You want great partners across different organizations, otherwise process won't work very well. Yeah. So hopefully that helps answer your question.
Yeah, I want to be super conscious of time, but I do want to ask a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Curious to know, when you're doing that kickoff, so we have a similar process where we do a sales huddle and they give us all that context of how it went with the negotiation, what has been discussed, what has been promised. So expectations are, we're on the same page. And then there's a meeting with the customer, CSM being me, and then the salesperson, and they kick it off, and like you described. But I'm just curious to know if there was an onboarding team dedicated to, getting them set up, would that call include both the CS engagement, the onboarding, and the sales, or would it be like sales to onboarding, one meeting, then later down the timeline after they're trained, a onboarding to CSM kind of discussion? How do you see it?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that, because we actually have done it a couple different ways. Initially, it was just the account exec, sales, and then the onboarding team member. But quickly we realized that, hey, it would be nice. It would be a nice gesture that they know. We try to reassign the engagement team up front so they know who the CSM is going to be. And so what we try to do is have the CSM on the engagement side attend the meeting as well, just to say hello. Hey, I'm Brian. I'm going to be your CSM once Tanya is done with your onboarding. I'm going to be in the background. I'm going to know what's going on, but at least I will be there. And then on the flip side, the towards the tail end, what will typically happen is the onboarding team will sort of graduate them or transition them. All the notes are in the Salesforce object, and then the engagement CSM they'll fire off. Again, this is back to the tech touch. An email will get fired off once a implementation is marked graduate or something like that. Emails fired off to set up a check-in call in 30 days to see how things are going.
Key milestones, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
More question? Oh,
Yeah, just to make sure there's. Cool. Yeah, making sure that I answered everyone's question. And again, I put my LinkedIn up front, or I think maybe Dart did. So feel free to connect with me to have a conversation. As Maria knows, I'm not shy about reaching out. Cold email outreaches are. We're not perfect. I think we all feel like we have imposter syndrome. I certainly did today sharing this information, but you all are smart people. There's a reason that you're in this field. There's a reason you do good work. So just know that we're all probably struggling with the same challenges to varying degrees. And, no one really, I think, fully has it figured out. I think there's a lot of companies that do it really well, but those companies also have a different set of challenges too.
And there's always room to improve. Companies have already a model. There's lots of improvement too. So, Brian, this has been fantastic. I think there's lots of message there in the chat. And I think everyone should reach out to Brian on one-on-one if you guys want to go deeper on this topic that you can spend hours discussing, right? The tech touch. It's quite in depth. Again, Brian, thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed it. This was extremely super fun. Please follow us on LinkedIn and join our Slack channel, just because in that way we can grab other new topics for the next meetup. And also, if there's a speaker that you guys have in mind that you guys want to learn more about, feel free to send it to Dart and myself, and we'll try to get that coordinated for the next time. And that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Dart.